and it was the worst pain I really ever felt in my life.
Now, Mr. Carbo, did you? I have one more question about the actual training, safety training course. Did you move from where Drew Cantrell told you to stand at the beginning of that course?
No, never. I followed his instructions exactly.
Okay. Now, did you sue both Shooting Star Gun Club and Drew Cantrell in this case?
Yes, I did, and eventually, Cantrell and I were able to settle for $20 million.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Once again, Your Honor, my name is Sasha Vishankar for the defense. Good afternoon, Mr. Carbo. You went to Shooting Star Gun Club because they were a family-owned business with a tight-knit community. Is that correct?
Yes, I heard they had close ties to the community.
On direct, opposing counsel brought up the emails you exchanged with Skylar Coleman. What you didn't mention on direct was that Coleman recommended multiple firearms to you over email, didn't they?
Yeah, sure she did.
Coleman also detailed the procedure for purchasing a firearm, correct?
Yes, she did partially go over it, but
and then
thing.
On top of that, Coleman invited you down to the shop to answer any more questions you might have. Is that correct?
Yes, and I decided it would be better if I could go in and talk to Coleman.
Let's talk about that day, May 14th, 2022. You went into Shooting Star Gun Club. Coleman spent over an hour just with you, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And when they sold you that firearm, I want to talk about some of the things that Coleman either knew or didn't know. Coleman knew that you didn't have a mental illness when they sold you that gun, correct?
Yeah, I'd like to object to speculation. How am I witness supposed to know if Skylar Coleman knew if he had a medical illness?
Your Honor, Mr. Carbo filled out a firearms transaction form where they ticked certain boxes and handed that form to Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman had direct knowledge of Mr. Carbo's previous experience with these incidents.
I'd like to hear that from the counsel, so elicit that confirmation first and then re-ask the question. Objection is over.
Mr. Carbo, when you went into Shooting Star Gun Club, you filled out a firearms transaction form, is that correct?
Yes, I did fill out a government form that Coleman had given me.
And on that form, you indicated that you had no mental illness, correct?
Yes, that's what I put on there.
You indicated that you had no past drug abuse?
Yes, that's right.
You indicated that you had no past criminal convictions?
Yes, absolutely.
You then gave this form to Ms. Coleman?
Yes, that's right.
And only after checking that you checked these boxes, Ms. Coleman sold you the gun, correct?
Well, she didn't sell it to me immediately that day.
She sold it to you 2 weeks later?
Yes, that's right.
Let's talk about that day now, May 28th, 2022. When you came in, Skylar Coleman gave you a liability waiver, is that correct?
Yes, she had me fill out the exact same government form that I filled the first time. For whatever reason, I don't really know. Maybe they lost it. They just want to kill me again.
Your Honor, for the record, I'm retrieving what has been previously marked as Exhibit 7. Permission to show a copy to opposing counsel?
Yes.
May I approach the witness with Exhibit 7? Would Your Honor like the copy?
Yes, please.
Mr. Carbo, what is Exhibit 7?
So this is the government form that I filled out. It's release of liability, and it says on the top.
And does it appear to be a fair and accurate representation of that?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 7 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
The objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 7 is accepted.
May we publish Exhibit 7 to the jury?
Yes.
Mr. Carbo, I'd like you to read silently as I read aloud to the jury on point 2 at the bottom. I voluntarily assume full responsibility for any risks of loss, property damage, or personal injury, including death. You took the time to read this waiver, right, Mr. Carbo?
Well, I mean, I guess I really just skimmed over it. When Coleman put this in front of me, she said, sign here, you'd be good to go.
So you chose not to read this waiver, is that what I'm hearing?
No, like I just said, I skimmed over it.
And then you signed your name at the bottom, correct?
Yes, that is my signature.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about the actual safety course. You can set that aside on page 1. During that safety course, Cantrell demonstrated the basic safety rules to you, correct?
Yes, he did.
And then Cantrell demonstrated each one of those safety rules they had explained.
Yes, that's right.
You don't know how much Cantrell moved prior to that first shot, do you?
No, I wasn't exactly sure.
You don't know if Cantrell pulled the trigger a second time, do you?
I mean, who else could have pulled the trigger? Cantrell was the only person that was holding the gun the entire time.
That's
He
not
shot
my
me in the leg.
question, Mr. Carver. If I could redirect you back to my question. You didn't see Cantrell pull the trigger a second time, did you?
It all happened in a fraction of a second.
Is that a yes? You didn't see that?
Sure, I didn't see it exactly.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Carbo. No further questions for this witness.
Can you redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Just have one brief question. Now, Mr. Cargo, I just want to ask about the form you filled out. Do you know if Skylar Coleman actually checked to make sure if any of those were accurate, any of the boxes we checked were accurate?
No, not to my knowledge. No further question.
Anything further?
No request, Your Honor.
Mr. Carbo, please step down. Plaintiff, call your next witness, please.
The plaintiff calls Ross Hernandez. Permission to proceed?
Yes.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning. My name is Ross Hernandez, and I own a small business in the same exact strip mall as Shooting Star, specifically a costume store, selling costumes from books to anime to movies. We really have it all. I'm currently dressed as a lawyer. I am also a frequent visitor of Shooting Star.
What else do you know about Shooting Star, though?
Shooting Star is an amazing place, and Skylar Pullman is a respectable and nice businesswoman. I always go to her shop to get a drink and socialize.
If you like Shooting Star so much, why testify against it?
Well, as I said earlier, Shooting Star is an amazing place. However, there's just one one employee who rubs me the wrong way.
Which employee is that?
Drew Cantrell.
Do you know Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm a frequent visitor of Shooting Star, and Drew Cantrell is an employee there.
Do you know others who know Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I do.
Permission to approach the witness who has been previously marked as exhibit.
Yep, no witness.
I'll let the record reflect that I'm informing the court. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is this document?
This seems to be a list of rules for the gun range at Shooting Star.
At this time, plaintiff moves to enter exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay, so admitted.
Permission to
To publish, yes.
Would you like to copy one? Have you ever seen Drew Cantrell break any of these rules?
Yes, I have. The first time was an incident in May 2021. The rule, every gun is loaded, treat every gun as if it is loaded and dangerous, and also only point at it if you want it to be destroyed. When I was talking with a friend, not paying attention until I saw Drew Cantrell suddenly pull a gun out of their side and point it at a customer's face. And Coleman reacted by yelling louder than I have ever heard her yell before, saying, "Cantrell, don't you ever point a gun at a person in my shop. We don't do that here."
Were there any other times Drew Cantrell broke another rule in this way?
If it's loaded, leave another line. I remember there's an incident I overheard off the top of my head. It was November 2021. I remember I was walking by, I was going to talk to Ms. Coleman about some vacation plans when I overheard Ms. Coleman yelling at Cantrell for leaving a loaded gun on the shopping counter after taking it out to the range.
And after these incidents, how long after these incidents did you hear about the shooting of my client?
I heard about it a week later after I was reading the paper.
And what did you think?
Well, it wasn't a surprise to me. I mean, third time's the charm. or Cantrell, sorry, yelled at the customer and then pointed a gun at their face and then brought a gun from the range and left it loaded on the shopping counter. I knew I was scared. I can't imagine what the customer to their gun to their face felt like.
Just to be clear, this is the third incident with your child.
Yes, it was.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Hernandez.
Good morning.
Do you know Skylar Coleman well? Yes?
Yes, I did.
You visit Coleman's shop about 4 times a week,
Yes, that is true.
but when you go in, you're only going to take a break or get lunch at Shooting Taverns.
Yes, that is also true.
You're not going in to shoot, are you?
No, I'm not.
You've only seen Drew Cantrell shooting 2 or 3 times.
Yes, that is true. However, of the times I have seen Cantrell shoot,
Excuse me, Mr. Hernandez, I apologize if my question wasn't clear. I'm just asking about how many times you've seen Cantrell shooting, not what Cantrell was doing. How many times have you seen Cantrell shooting?
about 2 or 3 times.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. You spoke on direct examination about a November 2021 incident, and I'd like to discuss that with you. Your Honor, for the record, I'm retrieving what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5A. May I approach the witness with what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5A? I'm showing a copy to opposing counsel. Would Your Honor like a copy?
Yes.
May I approach? Mr. Hernandez, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is this?
This seems to be a layout of the Shooting Star store, showing things like the shooting range, the cafe, etc.
Excellent. And is this a fair and accurate representation of the building layout of Shooting Star?
It seems to be.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 5A into evidence. Its authenticity has been stated.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 5A is submitted.
May I publish Exhibit 5A to the record? So in that November 2021 incident, you didn't actually see the alleged incident, did you?
No, I did not. I only overheard Cantrell being recommended to the
And you heard about it through the back office door of the shop.
Yes, that is also correct.
This would be the back office that you're talking about, Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, it would.
And you were standing here at the counter.
I believe so, yes.
So you actually heard about this incident through 2 sets of doors, here and here.
Yes, however, I do remember Miss Coleman yelling fairly loudly.
But you didn't hear Drew Cantrell at all during this incident, did you?
No, I didn't.
You only heard Coleman say Drew a couple times.
Yes.
But this is a gun shop, Mr. Hernandez. I draw a firearm, I drew my firearm. This is a pretty common phrase in this environment, wouldn't you say?
I suppose so. However, from what I heard, it seemed to be more so aggressive yelling at a person rather than mentioning drawing a gun.
But you didn't hear Cantrell's last name at all, only Drew.
Yes, I suppose.
You have no way of knowing that one of the doors wasn't closed.
That is true. However, I've still heard yelling at Cantrell.
Are you sure that you heard yelling at Cantrell?
I'm pretty sure that it was yelling at Cantrell, considering the aggressive nature of what she was saying, Drew.
You have no way of knowing that Miss Coleman wasn't speaking on the phone or talking out loud to themselves.
I suppose not. However, in my time of knowing Miss Coleman, I haven't known her to be yelling at herself, by herself.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Your Honor, we have no further questions for this witness.
And redirect to this witness?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness step down.
Yes. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I retrieve the exhibit from the witness?
Yes.
I can also grab our exhibits.
Go ahead. Call your third witness.
I'd like to call Dr. Morgan Judd.
Well, before you proceed, could you just repeat that name for me, please?
Dr. Morgan Judd.
Morgan Judd, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Dr. Judd, please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Morgan Judd.
Dr. Judd, do you have any training related to the use of firearms?
Certainly. I spent 10 years in the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and I was trained extensively in the use of firearms.
And could you please briefly explain where you received all relevant training to this case?
Of course, I'm a retired investigator. I used my experience from my time in the ATF to investigate illegal firearms trafficking, but now I'm an associate professor at the Center for Gun Violence Prevention at the Imperial State University School of Public Health. I also have a certificate in firearm safety from the Imperial Department of Justice.
At this time, the plaintiff offers Dr. Morgan Judd as an expert in firearm safety.
Objection? No objection, Your Honor.
Dr. Judd, how were you involved in this case?
Well, Justice Carbo reached out to me around January of 2022 and asked me to create an analysis of my report and the findings of this case, to which I have done and been paid for. But now that I have been called to testify, I will be paid for my testimony as well.
And this report, what materials did you rely on to write it?
My report is based off of the depositions of Skylar Coleman and Justice Carbo, the affidavits of Nick Allred, Avery Nguyen, and Drew Cantrell, and exhibits 1 through 22. But I should note that I did not personally interview any witnesses in this case.
And what exactly is this report about?
I essentially broke my report down into 4 different parts. First, I discussed how firearm safety is supposed to be practiced. The 5 standard safety firearm protocols were included. Second, I analyzed Shooting Star's new RFSP Act. Third, I determined whether or not Star violated this act. And fourth, I determined whether or not Shooting Star's violation of this act ultimately resulted in Justice Carbo's injuries.
And this first point, firearm safety, how is firearm safety supposed to be practiced?
Proper safety is absolutely necessary when you're handling firearms. Humans are fallible, and to assume that just 1 or 2 layers of protection will be enough is just plain wrong. The 5 standard safety protocols for handling firearms are as follows. 1, always keep your gun unloaded except for when it is in use. That means even if you're walking from one side of the shooting range to the other, your gun needs to be unloaded. 2, never point your gun at another person unless you are intending to shoot that person. 3, always use your firearm safety mechanic. 4, never pull your trigger unless you are intending to shoot that person. And 5, always be sure of your target before you shoot. But most importantly, anyone who is not sufficiently trained in the use of handling firearms should not be handling them.
Well, that brings me to my next question. You mentioned the RFSPA. What is that?
The RFSP Act, short for the Responsible Firearms Sales Practice Act, was signed by Governor Myers on January 1st of 2022. It is a heavily restrictive and aggressive act that prohibits the sale of a firearm to anyone that the seller knows or should reasonably know is unfit to own one. While this does include people with mental illnesses, it also includes people with little or no training in the use of firearms.
And did Shooting Star violate the RFSP Act in this case?
In my opinion, yes. Yes, they did.
Could you explain how?
Well, in Imperion, under this new law, gun shop owners are supposed to take responsible steps to ensure that the people they sell their guns to are fit to handle them. The fact that Shooting Star was willing to sell a firearm to Justice Carbo, knowing that he did not have any experience with handling them, is in direct violation of this act.
And sorry. Permission to approach the witness with Exhibit 15. Dr. Judd, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is an email chain shared by Skylar Coleman and Justice Carbo.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of that?
It seems to be, yes.
Right. Now, you mentioned the RFSPA doesn't allow gun shops to sell weapons to people who are unfit to own one. Does anywhere in this document, does Skylar Coleman, the owner of Shooting Star?
Objection, Your Honor, the exhibit conference and give evidence. I believe in Cleveland County different things to enter Christian A and C, if I'm not mistaken.
Your Honor, I'm not attempting to admit this into evidence. This witness has already been admitted as an expert in firearm safety. He can testify under Rule 703 to otherwise inadmissible evidence, so long as that evidence is going to how he formed his expert conclusion and is significantly more probative to prejudice.
Counsel, could you clarify for me, why is this more probative?
Your Honor, we're using this to show that Skylar Coleman had noticed that Justice Carbo had no idea what he was doing when he was handling he was going to buy a gun.
So if you could just clarify the prejudicial effect of this.
Your Honor, not specifically prejudicial effects, but I believe in the previous entering of the 15A, we had redacted everything except for the third statement. I'm just trying to clarify what opposing counsel actually was doing.
That's correct, counsel. Everything has been redacted from exhibit 15A, but specifically, they're not trying to censor the exhibit. So if you have no objection to using this under 740, then the objection is overruled.
No objection, then, Your Honor.
You would
I'll re-ask my question. Anywhere in this document, does Skylar Coleman do anything to address Justice Carbo's concerns?
No, nowhere in this chain does Skylar Coleman address any of Justice Carbo's concerns or questions about buying a firearm.
And now I'd like to talk about that second point you mentioned with the RFSPA, where you can't entrust a firearm with someone who's not trained to. Did Shooting Star violate the RFSPA in that way?
I believe they did by assigning Drew Cantrell to teach Justice Carbo how to handle his firearm.
Why was it dangerous to entrust Drew Cantrell with a firearm?
Well, prior to this impromptu training session, Drew Cantrell had a poor track record when it came to handling firearms. The Shooting Star knew about this poor track record because it had accumulated at their facility.
Right, would you recognize a copy of that if I showed it to you today?
Yes, I believe I would.
Let the record reflect and show opposing counsel a copy. Would Your Honor like a copy?
Yes, please.
Dr. Judd, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
Is the firearms checkout log for Shooting Star?
And is it a fair and accurate copy?
It appears to be, yes.
At this time, the plaintiff offers exhibit 16 in evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 is admitted.
Dr. Judd, what does this tell us about Drew Cantrell?
Well, it states that of the 3 times that Drew Cantrell returned a firearm, two of the 3 times were returned with an incident, meaning that he mishandled them. One of these happened before his promotion, which should have raised red flags already, but one happened after his promotion. Obviously, Drew Cantrell showed no regard for safety practices, and because of this, he should not have been assigned to teach someone else how to handle a firearm. This is why Shooting Star violated RFSPA.
You can set that document aside now. What about the incident itself? Could you tell us what went wrong?
Well, despite all of what I've said earlier, I think there are a few key factors that contributed to Justice Carbo's injuries. First off, Justice Carbo and Nick Allred were standing much too close to Cantrell during his demonstration. There should have been barriers put in place to separate the
Objection, Your
instructor.
Honor, under Rule 407's inadmissible testimony as it is subsequent remedial measure. Response.
Your Honor, this witness is just testifying to how what went wrong with the incident itself. He's not stating anything that is used to defend the plaintiff against negligence, which is what 407 is used for. This witness is just testifying to what should have happened to protect the to have protected the plaintiff from getting hurt.
May I be heard, Your Honor? Yes, Master. Under Rule 407, the evidence and subsequent measures, like the fact that Shooting Star should have applied barriers to protect the 2 clients from the shooting, is indeed going towards negligence. And this is a subsequent measure they should have taken that's going to prove the plaintiff's claim. And therefore,
We're still speaking about the day in question, so the objections are closed.
yes, Your Honor.
And could you please finish your answer?
Well, as I was saying, there should have been barriers put in place to separate the instructor from the students, but there was no such thing, allowing Allred and Carbo to stand much too close to Cantrell. Secondly, Both Allred and Carbo testified that they saw Cantrell flinch before his first shot. Qualified instructors, they know very well the importance of maintaining a firm grip on their firearms to reduce recoil. And lastly, Cantrell failed to recognize that the recoil of his first shot redirected it, shooting another time in quick succession, which then resulted in Justice Carbo being shot in the leg.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination? Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Judd.
Good morning.
Now, on direct examination, I heard a few things I'd like to address. You mentioned you were paid to offer your testimony in court today, is that correct?
Now that I have been called to testify, I will be paid, and that is standard industry practice.
And that's $14,400 for your report, and an additional $6,000 for being here in court today.
Again, that's just standard industry practice.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. You also mentioned that with regard to the emails, Pullman failed to adhere to some measures in terms of providing information to Justice Carbo, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
What you didn't mention was that Pullman detailed the exact procedure for how Carbo should have gone about buying a firearm. Is that right?
She did, but she didn't answer any of his questions about how to handle one, and she didn't offer any sort of training to him on how to handle it.
Is that a yes to my question that you did detail the buying procedure outlined as shooting start guns updated?
Yes, she did, but again, nothing about how to actually handle the firearm.
Thank you, Dr. Dunn. Let's talk about the two incidents that you brought up on your direct examination regarding Drew Cantrell. In these incidents, they happened over a period of years. Is that correct?
That's correct, but as a qualified instructor, you shouldn't be making those mistakes at all.
But in either of these incidents, was anyone harmed?
They were not harmed, but that doesn't subtract from the dangerousness of these actions.
And were either of these particular violations ever repeated again in the time that Drew Cantrell was employed before May 28th?
No, they were not. However, they were not. No.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. Let's talk about firearms now. You had a few conclusions regarding the trigger and the recoil of the Glock 22, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, Dr. Judd, you never actually analyzed the trigger or the recoil of the Glock 22 in question today in court?
I didn't really feel a need to, so I did not, no.
And you understand that a light trigger is one that can be pressed with little to no force applied, correct?
Yes, I am aware of that.
You didn't check the gun to see if it actually had light recoil?
Again, I didn't really feel a need to examine the gun.
And furthermore, a Glock 22 is known to be, in your own words, safe to use, relatively easy to fire.
That's correct. It's usually recommended to newcomers.
Newcomers like Justice Carbo?
Yes.
And Pullman did, in fact, in those emails, recommend a Glock 22 to Justice Carbo, correct?
Yes, she did.
Dr. John, I'd like to talk briefly about your history working in firearm policy and what you've done in that field. You have a history of advocating for stricter firearm policy regulations, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'm a firm believer in more regulations when it comes to selling firearms.
And you have a personal interest in advocating for stricter policies?
Yeah, that's correct. My niece was shot and killed by a stray bullet.
I'm really sorry for your loss, Dr. Judge, but this did have a significant impact on your own views on the gun legislator in court today.
Of course, when you lose a family member, you want to bring justice to them, and you want that to not have to happen to anyone else. You don't want anyone else to have to feel that pain.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. No further questions, Your Honor. Redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that my witness be able to step down and retrieve my exhibits.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Judd. Anything further from the plaintiff?
At this time, the plaintiff.
Don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay, in that case, we will take a 5-minute break. Council will be back as you seat ready to proceed in 5 minutes.
Your Honor, maybe you check the timekeeper to report the time remaining.
Oh, yeah.
Your Honor, the plaintiff has 33 minutes and 56 seconds, and the defendant 38 minutes and 46 seconds. I see it from about the. Yes.
I guess when this.
I love that there's a thing over the table. Spit in the wind. If I could say something if they brought that up and I never got to. I'm gonna ask you. If they said, it's been- Yeah. What or something else? Sure, you want to share? See, there's like an episode.
It's actually the only point
On the trigger. Unless you're sure. Yeah, I didn't go through those because I didn't want to. I did not want to go through all those sentences.
I have to go through them with a Cantrell, because I'm like.
So deadly, but
I hate playing Cantrell, because they keep bringing up my misdemeanors, makes me feel like a delinquent.
you are a delinquent. Delinquency.
Wait, that's an extra long.
That's what the Irish that they brought up. It made me look like a. What?
Was that why that one judge explained that?
Probably.
I thought it was actually.
One of them was ripping. I don't know what's wrong.
How you feeling, EK?
Don't ever call me that.
I've been calling you EK for like 3 months now.
Hey, you guys are 15.
I've never heard anyone.
Yeah, for months now. No, you have not.
I've been calling you EK.
Don't pour water on.
I've been calling you
Yeah, right now.
You just sound like screaming.
No. Okay.
Okay. I've been calling you EK since the start of school. And you never.
This is the first time
It does.
I've looked at.
Okay.
Is it actually?
Yes.
What's cool? I actually have a picture. Or. I don't know if it's. Oh, yes.
Trial is called to order. Defense counsel, will both parties are you present and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm ready to proceed.
The defense right to proceed, Your Honor. Please call your first witness. The defense called Drew Cantrell. Sorry, guys, we are waiting for a jury.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
No, you're fine. I'll just wait, Your Honor, then. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cantrell.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last?
My name is Drew Cantrell. That's Cantrell.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Cantrell?
I work at Shooting Star Gun Club.
How long have you worked for the gun club?
Been there for about 3 years.
And what was your initial position for Shooting Star?
I started off as a sales clerk and helped to manage the firearms inventory.
I like to talk about the interview process, how you actually ended up in that job. What was that like?
Sure, it was pretty thorough, but Ms. Coleman made me feel really comfortable at the time. The interview lasted a little over an hour. Ms. Coleman seemed pretty interested in my past experience with firearms, of which I have a lot, and as well as my experience in managing inventory.
And were you required to complete any paperwork?
Yeah, Ms. Coleman gave me something that looked like a background check form for the state of Ontario.
And did you have to complete any certification?
No, not for the sales clerk position.
Let's move on to what your current job is. What do you work for now?
No, a firearm safety instructor.
And what steps did you take to become a clerk to a safety instructor?
I received 2 certificates. First, a firearms safety certificate through the State of Ontario Department of Justice, as well as a firearms instruction certificate.
Your Honor, at this time, we're retrieving what has been previously marked Exhibit 19. May I approach the opposing counsel with a copy? Okay. And I'm now showing my witness a copy of Exhibit 19 for identification. Mr. Cantrell, could you identify Exhibit 19 for the court?
Yeah, this looks like my firearms safety certificate.
Would Your Honor like a copy of the exhibit? It is a fair and accurate representation of the certificate that you obtained.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offered Exhibit 19 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 19.
May you publish this to the jury? Now, Mr. Cantrell, I'd like to talk about your time at Shooting Star Gun Club. What were the initial stages like?
It was great. Once I was promoted to firearm safety instructor, all the customer reviews were great. I loved the job. Everything was going really well.
And could you remind the jury of who was overseeing your work?
Yeah, Skylar Clayton.
Were there any things that happened that didn't go as well as you had intended?
Yeah, there were 2 incidents.
Let's go through them one by one. What and when was the first?
Sure. In May 2021, prior to my promotion, there was an incident where I was cleaning a gun, and I guess I was pointing it at the shop floor, but all of a sudden Skylar Coleman came over to me and was screaming in my face, never point a gun at a customer. I tried explaining that's not what happened, but she was having none of it. She was pretty angry.
And just to clarify, were you pointing a gun at another person in the store, Mr. Cantrell?
No, not at all.
And was anyone harmed in this incident?
No.
Let's talk about the second one now. What happened this time?
The second one was after my promotion. Wasn't really an incident so much as just a misunderstanding. It was late at night. The only people left in the shop were myself and Miss Coleman. I took a gun, loaded off the line to unload it in the shop, and that was against company policy. It was a mistake. Miss Coleman wrote me up for it, and I made sure to never repeat it.
And so you did learn from your mistake?
Of course.
And neither of these incidents ever repeated again, Mr. Cantrell?
No, they did not.
Let's talk about why we're here in court today, May 28th, 2022. Were you working on this date?
I was.
And what were you doing?
I was operating firearm safety courses.
Who were you teaching?
I was teaching Justice Carbo and Nick Allred.
And could you identify Justice Carbo for the members of the jury here in court?
Uh,
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. Let's talk about what you did first. Did you provide any safety equipment?
I did, yeah. Ear protection as well as eye protection.
And how did you perceive Justice Carbo's familiarity with firearms?
Justice Carbo seemed like a true novice. He really didn't seem to know anything about guns.
Well, how do you accommodate true novices in your own safety instruction?
I make sure to thoroughly explain the safety rules to ensure that all the practice safe, and I don't let them touch the gun until I've demonstrated it properly.
For clarity, could you explain the rules that you specifically address to your clients?
Sure, I stress the three main rules of our shop. Firstly, never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Secondly, treat every gun as if it were loaded. And thirdly, to never point a gun at anything unless you would like to destroy it.
And did you demonstrate these rules to Justice Carbo and Nick Allred?
I did.
Now, how did you position your clients within the stall itself?
I positioned Mr. Carbo to my right, and I positioned Nick Allred further to his right.
Your Honor, for the record, I'm now retrieving Exhibit 2G from evidence. They are going to put counsel with a copy of Exhibit 2G. Not showing the witness a copy. Mr. Cantrell, could you identify Exhibit 2G for the court?
Yeah, sure. This looks like the stalls where I was operating the safety lesson.
And it seemed like a safe and accurate representation of where everyone was standing during the safety
It
training
does.
instruction?
Yeah, that blue X is where I was standing. That red X is where Justice Carbo was standing prior to me firing the first shot, and that yellow X is where Nick Allred was standing.
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. Would Your Honor like a copy of the exhibit? At this time, the defense offered Exhibit 2G into evidence. The authenticity has been stipulated. Objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2G is.
And could he publish one to the jury?
Yes.
And now, Mr. Cantrell, you can hold it up and demonstrate like you were doing. Could you explain where the three of you are positioned and why you did so?
Yeah, sure. So that's myself. That's where Justice Carbo was standing. That's where I instructed him to stand at a safe distance. And there's where Nick Allred was on the other side.
So Mr. Carbo was placed at a safe distance away.
He was at first.
And did this change at all at first?
Yes, once I shifted my focus down range towards the target to fire a demonstration shot, I guess Mr. Carbo had moved closer to me to get a better look or something, but all of a sudden he was right on my right shoulder when I shot the first shot.
And when you shot that first shot down range, what did you notice?
Yeah, let me tell you, I've shot plenty of Glock 22s in my time, and hundreds even, and I've never experienced anything like it. The recoil was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and the trigger mechanism seemed off as well.
The recoil and the trigger, did you have any control over this gun when you shot that shot?
No, not really.
And what happened? How did Justice Carbo react to that first shot being shot?
After I shot that first shot, Mr. Carbo seemed to jump, and the excess recoil from what I can only assume to be a defective gun knocked my arm back, and Justice Carbo knocked the gun out of my arm.
To clarify, they made direct contact with your arm when you fired that shot?
That is correct.
And did you have any control over how Carbo was positioned at this time?
No, I did not.
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Cantrell, when you first applied to shooting star, you were interviewed by Skylar Coleman.
It was.
Not once during this interview were you asked about your job history.
No, he never asked me about my job.
Not once during this interview were you asked about your criminal history.
That is correct.
But if you were asked about your criminal history, you would have told him the truth.
Yeah, I would. I'm pretty open about my criminal past. I like to put it behind me. It was in my younger and more immature days. I like to think I'm a better man because of it.
You were told them about you, that you pled guilty to reckless driving,
I did.
that you pled guilty to a DUI.
That's correct.
And I'd like to talk about May 28th, 2022. You were teaching you were teaching Justice Carbo and Nick Allred how to, you were demonstrating them a safety course, right?
Yeah, I was.
Right, and you believe you followed all safety protocols during that.
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, now you're familiar with the sign in the gun range that outlines these safety rules?
I am, yes.
And, Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with Exhibit 8. It's already been admitted into evidence. Thank you. You recognize this document?
I do.
And this is the gun range safety rules.
Yes.
All right, now, please read silently as I read aloud from the 7th bullet. Check your weapon. Always make sure your weapon is functioning correctly, properly cleaned, and safe to use. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
All right, now you believe the gun misfired and shot Justice Carbo in the leg?
I do indeed, yeah. After Carbo bumped it out of my arm, I think it shot a second shot. Glock 22s have really sensitive triggers, and this one must have been especially sensitive.
And before this, you never tested out the gun to make sure it was working properly.
No, that's correct. I hadn't fired the gun prior to the safety lesson.
And I'd like to talk about another rule you might not have followed on here. Now you said you believe Justice Carbo moved closer to you prior to you taking the first shot,
Yes, I do.
and that's what caused him to bump into you and for you to drop the gun.
Correct.
All right, now please read silently as I read aloud from the 8th bullet point. Know your target and beyond. Always know that you are shooting at and be mindful of what is around and behind your target. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
You weren't aware of whether or not someone was too close to you before you took that shot.
No, exactly. Like the rule says, I was mindful of what is around and behind the target. I was focused downrange on the target, not what was going on behind me.
So you had no idea whether or not someone was too close to you.
Well, the last time I had looked, Mr. Carbo was where I had safely positioned him, and by the time I shot the first shot, he was right up on my arm. So of course he's moved since.
Thank you for your time. I have nothing further.
You redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Cantrell, on cross-examination, you were asked about your criminal record,
I was.
and you pled guilty to reckless driving and a DUI.
I did.
Did either of these incidents influence how you performed and worked at SSBC?
Oh, no, not at all. They were well in my past and had nothing to do with guns.
Was there even an ounce of alcohol in any of your time working with the gun club?
Certainly not.
And in your decades of handling firearms and years of working with Shooting Star Gun Club, had you ever experienced gun mechanics like the one on May 28th?
No, never.
And could you explain for the jury why you did not check your surroundings before shooting that next shot?
No, I had safely positioned the two customers prior to the shot. I didn't feel it necessary.
And Mr. Cantrell, did you actually pull the trigger a second time?
No, I did not. As I said before, the trigger mechanism must have been defective.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. You are dismissed.
Your Honor, Commissioner, to retrieve my.
Yes.
Maybe retrieve our control, Your Honor.
When you're ready, you may call your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Jackie Staub to the stand. Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sir. Hello, my name is Jackie Staub. For the past 11 years, I've worked as a firearm and tool mark examiner at my own firm, Staub Examiners, LLC.
Why are you in court today?
I'm here to testify as an expert witness for the defense in the field of firearm mechanics, analysis, and firearm safety.
I'd like to begin by talking about your background. What's your educational background?
I received my Bachelor's of Science in Physics from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. I'm a proud ring knocker.
And what's your professional background, Ms. Stone?
In 2003, I was deployed to Iraq. I served as an artillery officer in the U.S. Army for 7 years, where I also qualified as an expert pistol shot. I left active duty in 2010.
In your time at West Point and in the Army, what experience did you get with firearm safety?
Through my experience as a commanding officer in the artillery, I was responsible for managing a company of 100 to 200 soldiers on firearm safety, as well as working with firearms on a daily basis. This including running gun ranges, live firing exercises, and qualification sessions, all which required extreme precision and supervision on gun safety.
Thank you for your service. You mentioned earlier that you're a firearm and tool mark examiner. What experience have you gotten at staff examiners with firearms?
Well, I've been managing firearms since I was a plebe at West Point. I've also received gun certifications from the Imperial Department of Justice and from the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. That all leads up to now, which I manage my own firearm analysis center, Staub Examiners.
And why did you decide to open your own firearm analysis center?
Building Staub Examiners was motivated by my dedication to ensuring that everyone has access to thorough and proper safety training. In addition to our services, we also offer a free firearm safety course.
For the record, I'm retrieving what has previously been marked as Exhibit 24 from the counsel's table. I'm approaching the witness with what has previously been marked as Exhibit 24. Your Honor, would you like a copy of it? Stop, do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
What is it?
This is my current curriculum vitae.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of your current educational and professional background?
Yes, sir, it is.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 24 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 24 is entered.
May we publish Exhibit 24 to the jury? Thank you. Your Honor, the court has previously ruled that Jackie Staub meets the threshold for an expert witness in the field of firearm mechanics and analysis. Additionally, we would like to offer her as an expert witness in the field of firearm safety. Therefore, we ask the court to recognize Ms. Staub as an expert in the field of firearm mechanics, firearm safety, and analysis.
No objections, Your Honor.
Ms. Staub is entered as
You may set the exhibit aside. I'm now retrieving what has previously been marked as Exhibit 1 from plaintiff's counsel's table. Got a copy. Counsel. Ms. Staub, do you recognize this weapon?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is this?
This is the Glock 22 purchased by Carbo and used by Drew Cantrell on May 28th.
And is this gun in substantially the same condition as when you examined it in preparation for your testimony?
It is.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 1 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is entered.
Ms. Staub, could you come around the jury with Your Honor's permission? Ms. Staub, can you step down from the jury table?
Yes, sir.
And could you demonstrate to the jury the firing mechanism of this gun?
Of course. First, ammunition is initially stacked in a vertical fashion in the magazine, which is inserted into the grip. Second, there's a trigger and trigger safety. When the user presses the trigger, the firearm will fire. If the trigger safety is on, it will not fire if the firearm is dropped or any other pressure not from the user is subjected to the trigger. And here, lastly, we have the slide. After the firearm shoots, the slide will move automatically backward, ejecting the empty cartridge and loading a new one.
Thank you, Ms. Staub. You may now sit down and sit down. I'd now like to speak about your inquiry. What questions did you seek to answer in your investigation?
First, if Cantrell was unfit such that Shooting Star Gun Club should not have hired her as an instructor. Second, if Cantrell followed industry best practice during the safety training. Third, the main causes behind the misfiring. And lastly, if the sale of the Glock 22 to Justice Carbo was reckless.
First, let's talk about Cantrell's experience. What experience did Cantrell have with firearms?
Cantrell's experience begins in their childhood when his father took him hunting. With decades plus of experience, Cantrell is clearly no stranger to weapons. This is also shown through the multiple certifications he earned.
What government certifications did Cantrell obtain?
He obtained a firearms safety certificate and a firearms instructor certificate from the Imperial government.
What does this tell you about Cantrell's fitness for the position which they were in?
I can determine Cantrell was absolutely qualified to serve as a safety instructor, shown through their decades plus of experience, as well as their certifications.
Second, let's talk about industry best practices with respect to firearm handling. What are those best practices?
Industry best practice is to maintain a firm and still grip on the firearm so that it allows for easier management of recoil as your hands act as a shock absorber, redirecting the firearm back to its initial position.
And did Cantrell follow these best practices during the May 28th safety training?
Yes, sir, he did. I find it unlikely that Cantrell would have flinched or twitched prior to the first shot. Avery Wynn, an eyewitness, corroborates this account. Something other than user error must have led to the inadvertent second shot.
Third, let's talk about that second shot. What caused the second shot?
I determined that there were two main causes of the inadvertent second shot.
And what were those two main causes?
First, the malfunction on the Glock 22, and second, the physical contact between Cantrell and Carbo.
How could the malfunctioning Glock have contributed to the second shot?
The recoil on the Glock 22 was more violent than any other firearm Cantrell had used in their decades plus of experience. Second, the Glock 22 had a lighter trigger, meaning that the force required to press the trigger is less. In sum, with the violent recoil and the light trigger, may have caused the firearm to shoot inadvertently for a second time without intention to.
And how could Carbo's physical contact with Cantrell have led to the second shot?
After the firing of the first shot, Carbo jerked, jumping backward, their left arm hitting Cantrell's right arm, causing Cantrell to lose control of the firearm and changing its direction. Nick Allred, an eyewitness, corroborates this account. The contact was such that it may have caused Cantrell to change the firearm's motional direction, leading to the inadvertent second shot.
Fourth, let's talk about Imperial Civil Code Section 2007. Are you familiar with this law?
Yes, sir, I am.
And what does this law state?
The Responsible Firearms Sales Practices Act prohibits the sale of a firearm to an individual where the vendor knows is unfit to safely own, use, or possess the firearm.
And how would a seller conduct a responsible sale in light of this?
The proper way to do this is to question the individual on their level of experience, reason for purchase, and knowledge on firearms.
Finally, let's talk about the overall conclusions of your report. What are your overall conclusions?
Yes. In sum, first, Shooting Star Gun Club entrusted Drew Cantrell, their qualified instructor, shown through their multiple certifications and decades of hands-on experience with firearms. Second, Drew Cantrell followed industry best practice by maintaining a firm and stable grip on the firearm on May 28th, 2022. Third, I found the two main causes behind the firearm to be the malfunctioning Glock 22 and the physical contact between Carbo and Cantrell. And lastly, Shooting Star Gun Club followed the RFSPA by adequately questioning Justice Carbo on their level of experience, then selling them a firearm that was appropriate for their experience.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Staub. Your Honor, we have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination?
Yes, sir.
Morning stuff.
Good morning.
Let's be clear for the jury. You're being paid for your testimony in court today,
I'm an expert witness. It's standard in the industry.
and you are a staunch believer in your Second Amendment right.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. I don't see what Ms. Dobbs' personal beliefs with respect to the amendment, the Second Amendment, have any bearing on her testimony for proving a fact.
Your Honor, the Mrs. Staub's feelings about the Second Amendment could influence the case because this is a case about firearms and whether or not Mrs. Staub how Mrs. Staub feels about the restrictions of firearms could affect how she testified in this case.
I'm inclined to agree that it's probative on her credibility, so the objections.
Yes, sir.
And Mrs. Staub, you've read the affidavit of Avery Nguyen.
I have read the affidavit of Avery Nguyen, yes.
In your opinion, does pointing a gun at someone follow best practices in terms of gun safety?
Pointing a gun directly at someone is a violation.
And in the reports that you read, Drew Cantrell did this.
In the reports that I have read, however, I also read Cantrell's affidavit, who stated that it was a misunderstanding and was simply checking the weapon.
But the gun was still pointed at us.
According to certain affidavits, however, Cantrell states that they were just simply checking the weapon.
But according to some of the affidavits, like you mentioned, it was still pointed at us.
Again, yes, however, checking the weapon is an essential part of firearm safety.
In your professional opinion, is taking a loaded gun off of the range, does that follow best practices of gun safety?
No, again, it is best practice to keep a firearm unloaded unless you intend to use it.
And in the case, or in the testimonies that you read, Drew Cantrell also did this.
Could you repeat your question?
In the affidavits and depositions that you read, Drew Cantrell also took a loaded gun off of the range.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, I'd like to talk about the distance between Avery Nguyen and the incident. You aware that Avery Nguyen was about 30 feet away from the incident at the time?
Yes, sir, 30 feet. That's a first down in football.
And at the time of the incident, there are 8 partitions in between Avery Nguyen and the incident.
If you mean gun ranges, then yes.
And you're aware that Nick Allred was standing directly next to the incident when it happened.
Yes, but Nick Allred was simply a novice in firearm usage who was taking an instructional class, whereas Miss Nguyen had lots of experience with firearms. I would imagine she would be able to better detect improper form than someone who was in an instructional class.
But you don't need to be an expert to see a flinch, do you, Mrs. Stumpf?
No, you don't. However, you need years of experience to really recognize improper form.
Who do you think had the best or the better view in this instance?
I believe that although Nick Allred technically had a better view, that does not mean Miss Avery Nguyen could not have seen clearly what was happening. Again, she was 30 feet away, a first down in football. That's a very reasonable distance for someone to have a clear view of the events that were happening.
I'd like to shift gears one more time to talk about the weapon in which the incident took place. Do you believe Mr. Cantrell when he said that the weapon had terrible recoil?
In my expert opinion, yes.
And wouldn't such a gun be dangerous to have in the hands of a rookie like Mr. Garbo?
In this very, very special circumstance, yes. But again, the Glock 22 is established to be a suitable weapon for a beginner under normal circumstances.
And was there anything stopping Mr. Cantrell from just simply testing out the weapon before he demonstrated it to 2 rookies?
No.
No further questions.
Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, read through your record. Ms. Staub, what experience did Avery Nguyen have with firearms contrasted with the experience of Nick Allred?
Miss Nguyen has had decades of experience firing firearms, and is a dedicated and common customer there at Shooting Star. In contrast, Nick Allred was a very rookie, as you would say, firearm user. He was taking instructional class for firearm safety, whereas Miss Wynn had decades of experience and would be able to determine the correct form from improper form.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Thank you, Your Honor.
No recross, John.
May my witness be excused?
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Your Honor, may I-
Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Skylar Coleman to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Coleman.
Good morning, sir.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
I want to talk about why you're here. Why are you in court today?
To be honest, I shouldn't be, but as I understand it, my former customer, Justice Carbo, is misplacing his blame on my club and really my community.
Ms. Ms. Coleman, I want to go back to the beginning. What is your connection to Shooting Star Gun Club?
To put it simply, Shooting Star is my past, my present, and my future. My parents started it decades ago, back in 1989, when I was a teenager. And right after high school, I went into working for the family business. And in 2008, I took over as owner.
Why did you decide to become owner?
For me, it's all about the mission, providing safety and community for those who needed it most in Imperial. And after watching my parents for decades, I just knew it was the right profession for me.
Did you implement any changes after becoming owner?
Yes, I did. I ended up adding a cafe bar called Shooter McTaverns. It's done an amazing job at bringing people in that I wouldn't have thought. You know, people from all walks of life.
You mentioned a bar, Ms. Coleman. Do you have any regulations related to firearm activity and alcohol use?
Yes, of course. For starters, the bar and cafe is on the opposite side of the building from the shooting range. To even get from the bar, you would have to go through the shop and through the VIP lounge. We also had multiple posted placards and always checked IDs at the bar. We take safety very seriously at Shooting Star.
Ms. Coleman, I must ask, have there been any incidents related to alcohol use and firearm activity?
No, none at all.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Let's talk about some of the issues more central to today's case. How do you know Drew Cantrell?
Cantrell is an employee at the Shooting Star. I hired them back in June of 2020 to work as a clerk, doing paperwork and inventory in the back.
Could you elaborate more on this hiring process?
Yeah, of course. So we were hiring during the middle of the pandemic, and Cantrell had submitted an application. I already knew Cantrell, but I made sure to pull them in for an interview, making sure they had the right knowledge and expertise for the job of a clerk.
And did Mr. Cantrell meet those qualifications?
Of course. From the first 5 minutes, I could tell Cantrell knew their stuff. I mean, they knew who could be sold firearms and the different purposes for certain firearms. And that was more than enough information to work as a clerk, just doing paperwork in the back.
Is Mr. Cantrell still a clerk at Shooting Star Gun Club?
No. So back in August of 2021, our resident firearm safety expert had left. So we underwent the process of promoting Cantrell to firearm safety instructor.
Why did you choose to promote Drew Cantrell specifically to firearm safety instructor?
We promoted Cantrell for 3 main reasons.
Number one, they knew the ins and outs of firearms, and that was clear from the first interview, working with them for over a year, and the glowing reviews that were coming in. Secondly, they had the firearm safety certificate given to them by the Imperial state government. And third, if the first two weren't enough, I made sure that they went to other shooting ranges and watched instructors just to further their knowledge.
And during this period of their employment, were there any incidents with Drew Cantrell?
Yes, there were two small incidents over a 2-year time frame, but small or large were always on top of it as Shooting Star. You can kind of think of it as if, Taylor Swift at a concert messed up a line. It's not the biggest deal, and no one is harmed, like no one was harmed or injured with Cantrell. But Taylor Swift's going to practice that line over and over again, like we're always on top of it at Shooting Star.
Could you elaborate more on those two incidents?
Yes, so the first one had to do with Cantrell allegedly pointing a gun at someone. And the second one had to do with them forgetting to unload the ammo when going into the shop.
Ms. Coleman, you mentioned the word allegedly. Do you know if Drew Cantrell actually pointed a gun at someone else?
No, I don't. It was only reported to me and I never saw it, so I can't say.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Let's talk about the plaintiff in today's case. How do you know Justice Harbaugh?
Justice Harbaugh reached out in early May of 2022, just wanting to purchase a firearm from the Shooting Star. We exchanged some emails and then we agreed that they should probably come in on May 14th just to keep the process going.
What happened when Justice Harbaugh visited on May 14th?
Well, he came in the morning and gosh, I almost spent over an hour with him just detailing the process of purchasing the firearm. And then I could tell from that hour that they were a little nervous, new to guns. So I made sure to offer our complimentary firearm safety course.
When you sold Justice Harbaugh that gun, did you know if they had a mental illness in the past?
Yes, I did.
And how did you know that?
They filled out a government form, which I submit to the ATF and keep a record for our own. This asked them about their criminal record, their mental health, etc.
Did you provide any other documents to Mr. Carbo when they came in?
Yes, so when they came in on May 28th, I provided them a liability waiver.
Why did you give Justice Carbo a liability waiver?
Here at Shooting Star, we understand that guns are dangerous, and we understand that risk. So we want all of our customers to acknowledge that risk prior to coming into our shooting range or taking our safety course. It's very important to us.
Did Justice Carbo sign that waiver acknowledging that risk?
Yes, sir, he did.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Ms. Coleman. No further questions for this witness at this.
Good afternoon, Ms. Coleman.
Good afternoon, sir.
So you are the owner of Shooting Star Gun Club,
Yes, I'm very proud of it.
and you took over the shop in 2008, sir.
Yes,
I'd like to talk a little bit about Drew Cantrell. He's an employee, of yours, correct?
yes.
And when did you hire Mr. Cantrell?
I hired them back in June of 2020.
And you first hired him as a sales clerk, correct?
Yes,
And he eventually ended up working as a safety instructor.
yes.
When you hired Mr. Cantrell, you had never asked him about any sort of criminal record that he had had?
No, but I conducted my own background check through that interview. I didn't think he was there as it was just a clerk position, so that interview was enough.
But before working for you, Mr. Cantrell had never had a job involved with gun use or handling, right?
I didn't know, I didn't ask about that, but I did know they had decades of experience with firearms.
When you promoted Mr. Cantrell, you never made him go through any sort of formal training, did you?
I personally didn't, but they had received the firearm safety certificate from the Department of Justice. And to do that, you have to go under an instructor from the Department of Justice. So the government did the training and that course for, I assume, several months. But at Shooting Star, we did not do it, which I would say a government training is probably better than what we can do.
But that certificate, you never saw it, did you?
Oh, I saw it. I made sure that they had it prior to becoming an instructor. And they also got their instructor certificate
Is it your sworn testimony that you saw the safety certificate that Drew Cantrell had?
Yes, I would have had to hire them into it.
You made a sworn statement in this case,
Yes, I did.
and in that statement, you swore to tell the whole truth.
Yes, I did.
Permission to approach the witness with her affidavit.
Yes.
Your Honor, I request that we see a copy of what was counsel showing to the class. This is taken care of, correct?
It is.
And this is your statement here.
Yes, it is.
Please read along silently as I read from line. No, I took Cantrell's word for it when they told me that they had learned from other instructors.
Yes, but if you look, yes, you did. But if you look to the back of the affidavit, I went through all of the exhibits, including Exhibit 19, which is the firearm safety certificate, which
But-
means I did see it.
That was after the incident, because that you went through that flip track, correct?
Yes, but I did see it.
But after you promoted Mr. Cantrell.
Well, I knew they had it.
But at the time of promoting him, you didn't see it.
No, I didn't, but I assume they did. They told me they did. And as a close-knit community, as Shooting Star, I trust when they have it. It was put in our employee records, and I just assume one of the other clerks put it in there. As you could probably check right now, it's in our history.
Now, you keep a log of employment practices, correct?
Yes.
And
just
would you
like I said.
recognize that if I showed it to you day before?
Yes, I would.
Permission to approach the witness with exhibit 20.
Yes.
Let the record reflect on the closing comment. Your Honor, would you like to comment? Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
This is the formal memorandum I issued Cantrell in November 2020.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of this document?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to enter exhibit 20 into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
So,
Mr. or Mrs. Coleman, please read with me as I read from the letter. Drew, you have failed to conform with the standards expected of Shooting Star employees. This letter serves as a written warning regarding incidences of a breach of employee code of conduct during the following times. May 2021, I received a report that, in violation of company policy and best practices, you aimed a firearm at another person in the gun shop following a verbal argument. November 2021, I received a report that, in violation of company policy and best practices, you returned a firearm after completing the safety course, but failed to empty the chamber of all ammunition. Shooting Star holds itself to the highest standards of safety and professionalism as a firearm dealer and training institution. We expect the same of our employees. I would like to reiterate that your actions henceforth are under scrutiny and that further encouragement of such acts shall be ground for terminations. You are advised to be more mindful of your actions and be on your best conduct and behavior. Regards, Skylar Coleman, owner, Shooting Star Gun Club LLC. Did I read that right?
Yes, you did.
So it would be fair to say that at the time of the incident with Mr. Carbo, you were aware of Cantrell's previous infractions.
Yes, as this shows, I took these infractions really seriously. If this happens again, you can see yourself, you read yourself, it would be grounds for termination. As Shooting Star would take safety very seriously.
In your direct, you talked about how these accidents were like Taylor Swift messing up the line, but if Taylor Swift messes up the line, it is not possible that someone gets hurt from that, correct?
No,
But if Cantrell messes up something like this, there is a chance that, for example, a firearm goes off and shoots someone, correct?
a chance, yes, but in these two incidences, no one was harmed and no one was injured. Both
But
of these
someone could
situations, oh, apologies, I'm just trying to explain further. Both of these incidents didn't have to do with anyone being put into injury or harm, and all my employees take the time to make sure that they're handling firearms with care.
But someone could have been.
Someone could have been, yes.
I would like to talk now about some text messages that you and Cantrell share. Is it true that you shared some text messages with Mr. Cantrell at the time of, or on the day of the safety course?
Yes, they're one of my employees. I text them regularly.
And would you recognize them if I showed you today in court?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to refer to witness with Exhibit 18. Let the record reflect on the approach of the counsel. Mrs. Coleman, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
These are the text messages I sent to Cantrell just around the time of the incident.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of this document?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to enter Exhibit 18 into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
So
Please read with me as I read from the exhibit. Okay, just cashed in on a couple of handgun sales. Both customers are rookie gun owners, so they need to take a safety course. I'm fully booked in the shop, so I'm having you run this one. I don't want to hear about any of your mistakes today, or again today, okay? And then Drew Cantrell responded, okay, got it. Did I read that right?
Yep.
I'd just like to look at the timestamps for a minute. You texted Drew Cantrell at 9:30 on Saturday, May 28th, 2022, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Cantrell responded at 10:56 that very same day.
yes.
And the safety course was scheduled for 11 o'clock, correct?
Well, they came in around 11 a.m. and they had to complete the purchase of the transaction of the firearm. So that took a little bit.
So Mr. Cantrell only responded 4 minutes before that when Mr. Carbo came in.
Yeah, they probably weren't carrying their phone around that day.
I'd like to talk about your promise to customers. You told your customers that your instructors were all-stars, right?
Question, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, this is just the admission of party opponent. This is Skylar Coleman's statements. And
I stand by my objection. Objection.
so you told your customers that your instructors were all-stars?
Yes, they are.
That learning guns from your instructors would be like learning about Michael or basketball from Michael Jordan.
Yes, that's in our commercial.
And except only this time, Drew Cantrell and other instructors are your Michael Jordan,
Are Michael
or
Jordan?
are the ones that you are likening to Michael Jordan.
Yes.
And this is the same Drew Cantrell that pointed a gun at another customer.
Allegedly pointed a gun at another customer. Again, I don't know if it happened. It could have just been them checking the gun and holding it down and someone perceived it as pointing it at someone else.
This is the same Drew Cantrell that took a loaded gun off of the range.
Yes, but they had full intentions to unload that gun, and again, the shop is closed. It was just the two of us.
This is the same Drew Cantrell that you never asked about his criminal history.
It wasn't necessary.
This is the same Drew Cantrell that agreed to teach a safety course 4 minutes before it was scheduled to happen.
Well, they were going to teach a safety course anyways. I mean, every day we usually have people coming in to take that course.
And this is the same Drew Cantrell that taught the class where my client was shot.
Yes, but that gun that was used in the course was malfunctioning, and so Cantrell had nothing to do with that.
And this was your all-star?
Yes.
No further questions. Permission to retrieve my.
Yes.
Big, I said.
you read back?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Coleman, my opposing counsel brought up the law on cross-examination. I'd like to start with the comments about the safety certificate. Your
Yes.
Honor, this time I'm retrieving the deposition of Skylar Coleman. Showing a copy to opposing counsel. Ms. Coleman, could you please flip to page 4, line 76 of your deposition?
No problem.
Could you please read aloud to the jury line 70?
Objection, Your Honor. You're said.
Response?
Your Honor, this is going to prove against my opposing counsel's attempt to impeach my witness. Is going to contradict that.
Outside the presence of the jury, what do you expect the witness?
Your Honor, the witness directly testified to the fact that they did ensure Drew Cantrell had that firearm safety certificate when they promoted them.
Could you just read the line outside the presence of the jury?
No problem. A little bit, sure, but we checked all the boxes. I made sure Cantrell earned a firearms safety certificate and observed other firearms instructors in the area so that we'd be offering competent instruction to our customers. Which, like I said before on the cross, I had seen the exhibit, I knew they had it, and that's why I promoted them. I would have never promoted them without that certificate.
Plaintiff, do you have a response to this, only that one line being entered as rebutting evidence?
I maintain that this was after.
Okay, the objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Ms. Coleman, opposing counsel said that you did not ensure that Drew Cantrell had a safety certificate. Could you please read for the members of the jury lines 76 through 78 from your deposition?
I can read them again. Yes, of course. A little bit short, but we checked all the boxes. I made sure Cantrell earned a firearm safety certificate.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Now, I also want to talk about those incidents that opposing counsel brought up. Your Honor, for the record, I'm retrieving what has been previously entered into evidence, Exhibit 20. I'm showing a copy to opposing counsel. Ms. Coleman, I'd like to start with that first incident in May 2021 regarding Mr. Cantrell aiming a firearm at another person. Did you actually see Drew Cantrell aim a firearm at another person?
No.
And finally, could you read that statement that you wrote after the listed instances?
Shooting Star holds itself to the highest standards of safety and professionalism as a firearms dealer and training institution. We expect the same of our employees. I would like to reiterate that your actions henceforth are under scrutiny and that further incursions of such acts shall be grounds for termination.
And were there further acts for termination that would have meant you needed to fire Drew Cantrell?
No, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions for this witness.
Recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Ms. Coleman, your excuse.
Your Honor, may I retrieve the
Anything further from the defense?
Your Honor, at this time, the defense rests.
We will take a 5-minute recess before we do certain time. How much time do we have? Your Honor, the plaintiff has 16 minutes and 34 seconds, and the defense has 11 minutes and 6 seconds. Thank you. The court is in recess. See you all in 5 minutes.
It says, will be subject to termination. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that is.
That's totally okay.
We can bring that up in the rebuttal.
Yeah, but you think. See, let's see. These lines of the witness generated. She's the last guy.
And after that.
So I wrote.
Wait. I might kind of want to get right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Why don't you read you just miss my hit that part right?
No, I'm saying.
If you're playing,
Very good.
We're gonna see that. Why are we actually? I think was another thing actually. Yes.
Oh, was it? That's one. That's not a group. That's not a group. I was underlining something. So I that's just as far as shooting. That's. All you have is most of it. I have something. Do they make any suggestions? Do they want what's going on? But if you want to use
Party is present and ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready.
Yes, of course.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is also ready to proceed.
Plaintiff, you may begin your code.
May I request a time check, Your Honor? Yeah. As 8 minutes and 35 seconds. And then I'd like to reserve any time I have left after my closing for a moment.
That's fine.
At the beginning of this trial, my client or my colleague, Taj Norris, showed you how when it comes to gun safety, 3 strikes is just too many. And throughout this trial, you've heard about each of Cantrell's strikes. that eventually culminated in my client's blood being spilled. But Justice Carbo stood exactly where Drew Cantrell told him to stand. He watched exactly what Drew Cantrell told him to watch, and still he was grievously injured. And why? Because the negligence of Shooting Star and their recklessness under the Responsible Firearms Sales Practice Act. You heard from my client, who confessed that he had no experience with firearms whatsoever. And Shooting Star still sold him a firearm, which is in direct violation of the RSPA. He also told you how he had to keep asking for some sort of training, any sort of training, and it eventually culminated in just a 4-minute thrown together course. You heard from Ross Hernandez, who is a very big fan of Shooting Star and Mr. Coleman or Mrs. Coleman, but still testified for Justice Carbo because he knows about Drew Cantrell's terrible reputation and his unsafe acts. And finally, you heard from our expert witness, Dr. Dredd, who calmly testified as to the negligence of Shooting Star and their violations under the RFSPA. You heard directly from him about how Mr. Cantrell's nearly fatal mistake is telling my client to stand just mere feet away from him as he demonstrated how to shoot a weapon to him and Mr. Allred. You heard from Dr. Dredd about Shooting Star's disturbing lack of preparation for this training course, and you heard, most importantly, that about the recklessness of Shooting Star entrusting a gun to Drew Cantrell and their selling of a firearm to my client, Justice Carbo. But that's just what you've heard from our witnesses. Look at the defense witnesses. In most cases, there's at least some sort of factual dispute between it. But on all of the key facts underlying Shooting Star's negligence and recklessness under the RFSPA, the witnesses agree. You heard from Skylar Coleman, who admitted that he hired Drew Cantrell without asking for a criminal record. He promoted Drew Cantrell despite the fact that he had never gotten formal training. And you also heard how he admitted that he didn't, or that he knew and had documented Drew Cantrell's prior unsafe actions that had happened before he sent my client off to be shot by Mr. Cantrell. Not only that, but the Mr. Coleman claims that if Mr. Cantrell had any sort of further incidences and further incursions of Shooting Star employee code of conduct, that would result in termination. But look at Mr. Cantrell. He's still working for Shooting Star despite shooting my client. Then the defendant put on Jackie Staub and blames the weapon or the incident on weapons malfunction. But Shooting Star should have known about that malfunction according to their own rules. Witnesses like these, it's really no surprise that Shooting Star tries to put the blame on my client's injury on my client for sneaking up on Drew Cantrell and having collision with his arm. But Cantrell and Carbo both agree that Carbo stood exactly where Cantrell told him to stand. So if Carbo was too close, it was because Cantrell told him to stand too close. And the government form that the defense brings up that Carbo signed, informing Shooting Star of his background, Mr. Cantrell never signed that form. So forget what our witness said. Just listen to the defense's witness. When it comes to gun safety, 3 strikes is too many. That's true whether you believe in second chances or not. We've met our burden of proof to find Shooting Star liable for the negligent hiring, retaining, and supervising of Drew Cantrell. Find Shooting Star liable. Thank you.
Your Honor, before I begin, permission to vote.
Yeah.
It's never happened before. It didn't happen this time either. That's what my co-counsel, Maester Ashri, told you at the start of this trial. And now, we can see that she was right. For decades and decades in Empyrean, Shooting Star was a symbol of safety and unity. It brought people together, people from all walks of life. The owner, Miss Skylar Coleman, upheld her family's reputation. But when Justice Carbo walked out of Shooting Star, they misplaced the blame. Now, a few minutes ago, my opposing counsel stood before you and told you a story about the game of baseball. They told you that 3 strikes equals an out. Fortunately, members of the jury, there was no 3 strikes. Let's talk about the first one. Drew Cantrell pointed a gun at someone else. Members of the jury, you heard from Skylar Coleman. She doesn't know if Drew Cantrell actually pointed a gun at someone else. There was no strike. The 3rd strike they referred to, the May 28th incident. They said that Drew Cantrell lacked the necessary experience to teach that safety. Their own safety expert, Dr. Morgan Judd, has the same certification as Drew Cantrell. Dr. Judd told you today they didn't feel the need to examine the gun used on May 28th. They didn't feel the need to examine the gun that fired at their client. Today, the plaintiff is suing my client for the negligent hiring and retention of their employee, Drew Cantrell. They also bring a second cause of action, that Shooting Star recklessly sold the gun to Justice Carbo, causing their own. Doing so, they took on a burden. Today, they had to prove 5 essential elements by a preponderance of the evidence. They have failed to do so, and I'll show you how in 3 simple steps. First, Drew Cantrell was unfit and incompetent to be a firearms safety expert. They failed to prove this. They failed to prove this because you heard from Skylar Coleman that Mr. Cantrell had decades of experience. Over 20 years of handling firearms before joining Shooting Star, and after they were hired, Mr. Cantrell built on that experience, watching other experts to improve their own skills. You also learned that Mr. Cantrell had been teaching that same safety course hundreds of times for over a year, and there was never an issue. She had the legal certification. He certainly had the experience, so we proved this today. That brings me to my second. That Skylar Coleman knew about this unfitness or incompetence. This was not proven today. This was not proven because Ms. Coleman assured you that Cantrell had the experience when they were hired as a sales clerk, and then when they were promoted to safety instructor. When Drew Cantrell took the stand today, they told you that Skylar Coleman was overbearing when it came to safety. When mistakes were made, mistakes that never caused injury or harm, Ms. Coleman didn't sit around. She didn't let it slide. Ms. Coleman ran Shooting Star like it was the Navy, issuing formal warnings, having stern conversations. These mistakes, they never occurred again. That brings me to my third point, that Drew Cantrell's retention as an employee directly caused Justice Carbo's harm. This was not proven. They failed to prove this because our firearms safety expert, Jackie Staub, told you that Miss Cantrell was not the problem, the gun was the problem. The Glock 22 had a light trigger. That trigger, combined with the violent recoil, a recoil Mr. Cantrell had not experienced in decades, members of the jury, the gun was out of Cantrell's control. You take a look around this courtroom today, not one person could tell you that Mr. Cantrell even pulled the trigger a second time. You also learned that on May 28th, Justice Carbo compromised their own safety. During that course, they crowded Mr. Cantrell, hitting his arm. Members of the jury, the guns malfunctioned, Carbo hitting Cantrell. There's far too much doubt to say that Drew Cantrell's retention was the direct cause of Justice Carbo's. Now, in the case today, the defense also brought forward an affirmative defense. Assumption of risk. We had to prove to you that Justice Carbo knew the risk and that they proceeded in the face of that risk. What this means is that even, let's say the plaintiff meets their burden of proof, you must still return a verdict of not liable if we meet ours. And we did. Today, opposing counsel talked about how Michael Jordan should have been teaching the courts. Members of the jury, Justice Carbo may have never held a gun, but it doesn't take Michael Jordan to shoot a free throw. That's not how this works. It doesn't take a firearms expert to know that a gun is a deadly weapon. And Justice Carbo knew this. They knew this because in court today, you saw that liability waiver. And it clearly stated, I voluntarily assume full responsibility for any risks of loss, property damage, personal injury, or even death. Ms. Carbo took the time to read this waiver. She signed that waiver. Doing so, she assumed that risk. On May 28th, 2022, Justice Carbo proceeded to face of that risk. Decades of safety, decades of community, one case, misplaced blame. Today, I ask you to remember the gun's malfunction. Remember the light trigger, remember the recoil, remember the experience that Drew Cantrell had. That's why at the end of this trial, we ask that you apply the law as the court will instruct you and find Shooting Star Gun Club not liable. Thank you for your time.
Whoever, can I request another time check, please?
Plaintiff has 11 minutes and 49 seconds left in their case.
And permission to move the. The defense just came up here and claimed my client's injury on himself, and they deflected to that with a waiver that covers my client knowing about the risks, but it does not cover Shooting Star's negligence for retaining, hiring, and supervising Drew Cantrell. At the beginning of the trial, the opposing counsel came up and said that Shooting Star was a clean slate under Coleman. Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Drew Cantrell pointed a gun at another person? Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Cantrell took a loaded gun off the range? Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Coleman did not ask about Cantrell's criminal record? Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Coleman retained Cantrell despite previous warning of further accidents resulting in termination? Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Coleman left Carbo, a gun novice, with a loaded gun for 5+ minutes? Was Shooting Star a clean slate when Drew Cantrell shot my client? We don't think so. Find Shooting Star liable. Thank you.
Everybody take a deep breath. Great job, congratulations, you are done. And I will stop talking. I'm gonna give my co-judges here an opportunity to introduce themselves, make any brief comments.
Thank you. My name's Peter Sadelsky. I've been.
Before we give comments, I'm gonna collect the ballots if that's.
Oh,
Sorry. Just 1 second. And then you guys also do the nominations. If you guys don't mind just introducing yourselves so they can do the attorney nominations and witness nominations. You can write your names on here.
So it's also written what we did.
Yes, please.
So we read all of them right here. Okay. This is my notes. I don't care. No, I can just write it.
You confirm with them that that's.
They actually have you guys on here too, or is it correct?
I think it's. This is not us.
No? Okay.
It's just,
Yeah, it's our.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is just.